Hello and welcome to Challenge Solutions. My name is Caitlyn, and in honor of White Cane Day, this video will be a comparison of canes versus guide dogs. Before we get started, I have a couple of quick announcements. First of all, we apologize for the very irregular upload schedule over the last couple of months. Our team has gone through quite a few changes. Macy has taken a step back from Challenge Solutions in order to focus all of her energy on her college education. So you'll no longer be seeing her in videos, and she'll be joining us for the podcast on a volunteer basis when she has time. That means I'm now in charge of all the audio video editing for Challenge Solutions until one of our other team members learns how to work with the editing software. And on top of that, I graduated college and moved to a new apartment. We've had a ton of technical difficulties, and our other team members started a new semester of college and are absolutely drowning in classwork. We got super behind, but we now have a lot of things pre-recorded and ready to go, so we hope to return to an every 2-week upload schedule for YouTube and a once-a-month upload schedule for the Challenge Solutions podcast. Speaking of the Challenge Solutions podcast, for our December episode, we'll be doing a Q&A, Ask Me Anything. So if you have a question about anything blindness related, or really anything that you're curious about within reason for Cole and I, and possibly Macy if she has time to join us, please leave that question in the comments on any of our YouTube videos or blog posts, or send us an email via the contact form on challengesolutions.org. Make sure you note that you want your question to be answered in the Q&A episode of the podcast in your comment or email to us. Of course, we do reserve the right not to answer anything super personal or inappropriate. With all of that being said, here are the pros and cons of white canes versus guide dogs. For some context, I have used a white cane in some capacity for most of my life. I did my freshman year on a college campus with a white cane. I matched with my first guide dog in July of 2019 and worked with him for 3 years. Unfortunately, he recently retired due to really bad anxiety, and I'm now back to being a full-time white cane user. I may apply for a guide dog again in the future, but right now my lifestyle just isn't great for a guide dog, and I'm not ready to have a successor dog at this time. So I've had experience with both mobility aids, and once upon a time I would have told you that I would never ever go back to being a cane user ever again, but here I am, and I don't think the answer is as cut and dry for me as it once was. Before I give you a list of pros and cons, I think it's important to recognize the differences between cane usage and dog usage, and the best way I can describe that difference is that a cane is an obstacle finder and a guide dog is an obstacle avoider. So with a white cane, you're going to hit all of the obstacles in your path. You're gonna feel every crack and bump in the sidewalk, every bush that's sticking out in your path, every tree that is hanging just a little bit too low, every truncated dome, every turnoff on the sidewalk, every flower pot and landscaping timber, every chair, every table, every door, etc., etc. And with a guide dog, you're going to sail around most of that. Most of the time, you're not going to touch any obstacles. Your dog is just going to take you to whatever you told them to find. So one of the major pros of using a white cane is that you get lots of tactile and auditory feedback. As a cane user, you get a sort of hands-on experience of the area that you're walking in. You're going to know about everything new that's added to that area because your cane is going to hit it, and you're going to figure out what it is if it's in your path, and you're going to encounter it on a daily basis. If construction is happening, you're going to know about it because you're probably going to walk into part of that construction. And depending on the cane tip that you use, it can be really good for echolocation. I personally use a ceramic cane tip, and it gives really good auditory feedback as you're walking. The flip side of that is that it's a lot of tactile feedback. A lot. And it can be exhausting if you're doing a lot of walking to feel all of that vibration up your hand. I have tendonitis in my wrist and muscle and joint pain because of some of my chronic autoimmune disorders, and using a cane for extended amounts of time, day in and day out, makes my arms hurt really bad. That constant vibration through my hand makes my joint pain worse, and it makes my wrists really sore, and that's something that I didn't really experience with a guide dog because it's a different kind of movement and vibration going up your arm every day. Another pro of white cane usage is that canes can fold up small and be tossed in a bag or a corner. If you're in a situation where it's easier to not have your cane, say on the beach or at a theme park, depending on what you're doing there, it's really easy to take a cane and fold it up and shove it in your backpack, or leave it under a table, or toss it in a corner when you get home and not have to think about it again until you need it. I think one of the biggest pros of cane usage is that the white cane is a pretty recognizable symbol to most people. There are people who have no clue, but generally speaking, most people know that a white cane means you're blind or at least visually impaired to some degree. And that can be a good thing or a bad thing, but I'm generally of the opinion that it is better for people to know that you're blind than for them to not, because if they know, then they're gonna understand when you need something or do something really awkward in front of them, and it saves you from having to explain yourself sometimes. Canes are also super inexpensive and pretty easy to maintain. Of course, you're eventually going to break a cane, and if you're like me, you're going to break a lot of canes in a pretty short amount of time. I'm very hard on my canes, but they're pretty inexpensive to replace every couple months or so. They're approximately $50, and they don't really require any maintenance. Like I said, you can toss a cane in a corner when you get home and it'll be okay. They're also really easy to grab and go. When you're ready to go somewhere, you can just grab your cane and you don't have to think about anything else, which is a super good thing, especially if you are a busy college student and you like to be spontaneous with what you do in a given day. And if you travel a lot, especially with groups of people, you don't want to have to think about your dog's park schedule when you are traveling and trying to have a fun vacation or trying to get work done in a new unfamiliar environment. There are also fewer access issues with white canes, at least in my experience. I've never had a situation where someone told me I couldn't go in an Uber or a restaurant with a white cane, but I have had a couple with my dog, and generally speaking, there are a lot more access denials with guide dogs than white canes. Canes also don't eat, poop, get sick, shed hair all over the place, or demand love and affection constantly. And depending on the type of person you are, this can be a major pro. If you're super busy and you don't really have time to dedicate to caring for another living being besides yourself, a cane can be the right mobility tool for you because they are super low hassle. You can grab it when you need it, toss it in a bag when you don't, and when you get home, you can hang it on its hook or toss it in its corner and not think about it for the rest of the night. Now, moving on to the cons of canes, as I said, they're a pretty recognizable symbol, and while sometimes that's a good thing, it can also be a really bad thing. Canes, in my experience, draw a lot of negative attention, and people yell at you and grab you a lot because when they see a white cane, they presume that you are absolutely incompetent. I wish I had a quarter for every time someone yelled at me that stairs were ahead, or that I was about to cross a street, or grabbed me as I was stepping off the bus or stepping into a crosswalk. In general, I think people assume that because you're blind and you're using a white cane, the white cane isn't actually much help and you don't know what you're doing. This did happen to me some with my dog, but way, way less than when I used a cane. I don't think anyone ever grabbed me when I was using my guide dog. They did yell at me a couple of times as I was approaching primarily stairs, sometimes street crossings. But also in my experience, being grabbed and yelled at as a cane user is way, way more distracting and disorienting than when you're using a guide dog, because at least in my experience, my dog would kind of keep me on track. Like, he was really good at regrouping and finding his target after someone yelled at us or grabbed his leash. They never grabbed me. They did grab his leash a couple times. But as a cane user, if someone grabbed me, it would really throw off my alignment. And I'm totally blind and I have a huge veering problem with a cane. And usually if someone grabbed me, it would disorient me to the point that I wouldn't quite hit what I was aiming for, and I would have to sort of problem solve my way to where I was headed, and if they hadn't grabbed me, that wouldn't have been a problem. That brings me to the next con, which is it's really hard to navigate without a shoreline, especially if you're totally blind and using a white cane. I personally really struggle to navigate open spaces because I have a really bad veering problem, and this can also translate to veering really bad crossing streets, which obviously is not ideal. Of course, there are techniques for problem solving in these situations, and if you can get to the other side of an open space, then you can figure out where you are if you didn't quite make it straight across. So it's not the end of the world, but it is something that I really struggle with and did not have a problem with really at all as a guide dog user. My next con, as I mentioned previously, is that you get a lot of tactile and auditory feedback, and while this can be a good thing, it can also be super overwhelming and exhausting and can even cause you more pain, especially if you have tendinitis or muscle and joint issues like I do. Guide dogs do sometimes cause pain for some people, especially in their upper arms and shoulder muscles because of the constant pulling on the harness. But in my experience, that was a lot less than cane usage. It was a smoother pressure on my arm and not as much vibration in my hand. Related to this, canes get stuck a lot. Canes will get caught in cracks or grass or bushes and stab you in the stomach. Also, canes can't detect overhead obstacles. There is an overhead protection technique where you put your hand up in front of your face so that you'll hit anything that is at your head level. But if you're in an unfamiliar area and you're not anticipating that a tree is hanging really low in front of you, you might not think to do that and you could walk smack into a tree branch. Dogs won't avoid all overhead obstacles, but a lot of times they will see them and avoid them, and you can train them to avoid specific overheads if they're on a route that you walk a lot. Lastly, canes are easy to lose. I have a truly terrible habit of laying my cane down under tables and walking away and having to search for it later. I've put my cane under my chair and accidentally kicked it, or other people have kicked it and it slid way across the floor and I've had to search for it and ask for help. The solution to this, of course, is to always wear a cane holster or always stick it in your bag instead of laying it somewhere random or leaving it under your chair, but I don't always do that, and I'm sure you won't always do that either, so it is something to think about. I've never lost a cane, as in had to leave wherever I was without one, but it's a little stressful when your mobility tool is missing and you have no idea what you did with it. That's a problem you don't really have with dogs because they come when you call them and are large and generally stuck to your side when you're out with them. Speaking of dogs, now it's time to talk about guide dog pros. And the first one is you can move a lot faster. I'm a fast walker anyway. I walk way faster than is recommended or totally safe with a cane most of the time. And in my experience with a dog, I could move faster than I could with a cane and be a lot safer doing it because I didn't have to worry about hitting obstacles at full speed or missing my landmarks or not reacting fast enough when my cane hit something. My dog would always stop and it was pretty fluid for me to just step forward and be in the right position. Whereas with a cane, I got stabbed in the stomach a lot because I would hit cracks at full speed and had a really bad habit of missing my landmarks because my reaction time compared to my walking speed was just not great. And I think it's generally most people's experience, even if you are a typically slower walker, that you can move a lot faster with a dog because it is a more fluid experience and you're just following your dog's motions. You're not worried about what you're feeling or counting landmarks or anything like that, because once you've taught your dog to find a specific target, they're gonna go to that target and they're not gonna hit anything in between unless there's something blocking your path that they can't figure out how to get around or they think you need to know about. It's also easier to navigate open spaces with a dog. A dog is typically going to take you in a straight line from point A to point B, so it's a lot faster and easier to cross, say, a parking lot, although I still wouldn't necessarily recommend crossing a parking lot if you could avoid it with a dog, than it is to cross one with a cane, because a dog is going to take you to the curb or the door or whatever you've told them to find, assuming you've targeted that thing in the past. Dogs will also clear overhead obstacles most of the time, as I mentioned previously. Sometimes guide dogs won't see overhead obstacles because they'll be focused on the path ahead, but you can train dogs to avoid specific overhead obstacles if they're things that you encounter on a regular basis. People also engage with you more on a more human level. In my experience as a white cane user, people would either freak out if they saw me in public on my own and think that I was absolutely incapable and was gonna die if I didn't have someone helping me, or they would straight up ignore me and not engage with me because they did not know how to interact with a blind person. This happens sometimes with a dog too, but in general, people see you walking with a dog and A, dogs are cute, so they're gonna approach you and say your dog's so cute, but B, because you're moving faster and more gracefully and not hitting all the obstacles, you look more confident, and the posture that you have to take to walk with a guide dog automatically is a confident stance, so they're gonna see you walking like that and think that you know what you're doing because you look like you know what you're doing, and they also assume that the dog knows what they're doing even though you're still fully in charge of navigation. So that can be a really good thing and lead to people engaging with you more and in a more enjoyable way. However, every conversation does tend to center on your dog, which can get super annoying. Like, sometimes I just want to talk about humans and human things and not my dog. The next pro is that you can target specific things. I already mentioned that you can tell your dog to find curbs and doors and things like that, but you can target just about anything with your dog if you do enough clicker training. I taught my dog to find orange juice in the gas station that was close to my previous apartment, and while he wasn't always spot on, he would get me close enough that I could find it really easily, easier than I could if I walked in with a cane and tried to find it myself. I also taught him to find water bottle fill-up stations, trash cans, and checkout counters. One of the biggest pros to guide dog usage is traffic checks. Guide dogs, contrary to popular belief, are not trained to help you know when to cross a street. You're still in charge of navigation and knowing when to go across the street and lining yourself up to cross the street straight. But some schools do train guide dogs to do traffic checks, and it's called intelligent disobedience. I think that's the right term, where if a dog sees that a car is coming, they can disobey your command to cross and not let you go. Or if you're in the middle of a street and a car turns in front of you or does something crazy, they will back you up to get you out of the line of danger. It's obviously not foolproof, and you still are in charge of making smart decisions about how you're crossing a street, but it does bring a little bit of comfort to know that your dog is probably going to traffic check you if you do something stupid or if a hybrid car comes along and isn't making enough noise for you to hear it. My last pro for guide dog usage is there is a protective aspect. Guide dogs are not trained to be protective. They're not guard dogs. They're not trained to attack if someone tries to hurt you. However, they are dogs, and I like to think that they would have a protective instinct if a situation arose where that was needed. And also, in my opinion, this is my opinion, I have absolutely no evidence to back this up, but if I were a criminal and I was thinking about jumping a blind person as they were walking home from campus or work in the dark, I would be a lot less likely to do that if they had a Labrador by their side versus if they were using a white cane. So I think there is more of a protective aspect to guide dog usage than white cane usage. At least I always felt a lot safer with my dog than I do with my cane. Finally, moving on to guide dog cons, dogs are expensive. Like, really, really expensive. You have to buy dog food. You have to buy poop bags. You have to buy ear cleaner and toothpaste and doggy shampoo. You have to pay for vet bills, both the regular checkups and when they inevitably eat things they shouldn't, like onions, that happened, and get horribly sick because of it. You have to buy toys. You have to pay to get them groomed every few months. The list goes on, and while some guide dog schools do have funding available to help with some of those costs, they're probably not going to cover cover all of those costs, and if you are barely providing food for yourself, you probably shouldn't take on the cost of a guide dog. My next con is you can't just grab your dog and go like you can with a cane. A dog is a living creature, and it has living creature needs. Whenever you're gonna go somewhere, you have to think about whether or not you need to bring food. Is it going to overlap your dog's breakfast or supper time? When's the last time your dog parked? Does it need to go to the bathroom before you go? Are you going to need to park your dog in the middle of wherever you're going? Do you have poop bags on your person? Do you have enough treats on your person for whatever you're doing? What's the weather like? Is it scalding hot or freezing cold or icy or snowy or pouring rain? Does your dog need to be wearing his booties, his cooling vest, his raincoat, his winter coat, etc., etc.? Related to that, you have to carry a lot of stuff as a guide dog handler. You're gonna have to carry food if you're gonna have to feed your dog while you're out of the house. You have to make sure you have the ability to get your dog water. You have to carry a bowl to put the food and water in. You have to carry treats if you do food reward. You have to carry poop bags in case your dog has to poop while you're out of the house. Depending on the weather, you're gonna have to carry your dog's booties, cooling vest, raincoat, winter coat, etc., etc. You may have to carry your dog's gentle leader depending on the situation that you're gonna be in, and you may want to carry an extra leash in case something happens to your working leash. I dedicated an entire pocket of my school backpack to guide dog paraphernalia, and it added a lot of weight to my backpack. So if you're someone who already has to carry a lot of things, or you struggle to carry a lot of weight, guide dog life might not be for you. The next con is dogs are a huge time commitment. You can't just fold your dog up and throw it in a corner when you get home like you can with a cane. They're going to want to play. They're going to want food. They're going to need to go to the bathroom. They're going to want snuggles and love and affection and praise and treats. They're going to need their ears cleaned and their teeth brushed and their fur brushed and baths and all kinds of things. So if you're someone who is already super busy and you struggle to get everything done for yourself in a given day, you probably shouldn't take on the time commitment of a guide dog. The next con is that guide dogs shed everywhere, all the time, especially if you have a Labrador. You are always going to leave a trail of fur wherever you go. In every vehicle you get in every building you are in every chair you sit in, it's everywhere. All the time. You are always going to have fur on your clothing. If you're fond of black leggings and you have a yellow lab guide dog, you're never going to be the same again. So if you're going to have a problem with that much fur, guide dog life probably is not for you. Also, if you ride with a lot of friends and family members who are not going to be okay with guide dog litter being in their car, this might be a problem for you. I always cringed every time I rode with a new person and had my dog because I knew I was leaving a massive amount of Labrador fur on the floor of their vehicle, and it was always awkward. I would offer to clean it and they never let me, but it's something that you are probably going to think about. Also, there are generally speaking more access denials when you have a dog. I've never been straight up denied access with my dog, but I have had people tell me I can't have a dog in a restaurant or a store or an Uber, and that's just something that you're going to encounter if you have a dog. You're gonna have to think about what you're gonna say in those situations and when you're gonna fight over it and when you're just gonna move on, and it's going to be a regular part of your life as a guide dog handler, whereas with a cane, you don't really get that as much. The next con is that dogs get distracted, or rather people distract your dog all the time. Even though guide dogs are highly trained, they are still dogs, and they are going to get distracted sometimes. If you're in a restaurant and it smells really yummy, or there are crumbs on the floor, sometimes your dog is gonna decide that he's gonna scavenge for food. Sometimes your dog will get distracted by other animals, or random smells, or people that are trying to distract him, and that's something that you just have to deal with and correct for as a guide dog handler. Canes don't get distracted. Also, as I mentioned, people interact with you a lot more when you have a dog, and while this is sometimes a good thing, it can also be a bad thing, or at least a super annoying aspect of being a guide dog handler. People will come up to you and randomly pet your dog while you're standing in line at Starbucks. People will come up to you and offer your dog food while you're sitting at a table trying to eat your own food. People will come up to you and try to have a conversation about how amazing guide dogs are and how amazing you are while you're just trying to find a bathroom. People will come up to you and tell you that you are mistreating your dog by making him work and being in harness all day. People will come up to you and ask if they can take a picture of your dog for their Instagram. People will take pictures and videos of you walking with your dog without asking permission. The human interaction that comes with being a guide dog handler is pretty constant, and while you're gonna meet some amazing people because of it, and some people are going to be understanding and have a genuinely good conversation with you, other people are going to be terrible humans and not take no for an answer when you ask them not to pet your dog because it's distracting and dangerous for you, or when you tell them not to give your dog food because they're on a really strict food schedule, or when you tell them that your dog actually loves his job and is the furthest thing from mistreated because he's gonna get a full body massage when you get home. Being a guide dog handler simultaneously makes you love and hate humanity, and if you're not prepared to advocate for yourself and advocate for your dog on a daily basis, you might want to stick with using a cane. That is my last con to being a guide dog handler. Really, what all of this comes down to is there is no cut and dry, this is better, this is worse situation to guide dogs versus white canes. It all depends on every individual's lifestyle and personal preferences. If you're trying to make this decision, I recommend writing down all of the activities that you do in a given day or week and any travel plans that you have for the future, and trying to think about whether a cane or a dog would be more beneficial in each of those situations. And also think about your lifestyle. Are you super busy and spontaneous, or are you pretty routine and scheduled with what you do in a given day? Would it be really easy to factor in your guide dog schedule to your day-to-day life, or is it going to be a huge hassle to work your schedule around 5 potty breaks and 2 meals a day for your dog, plus playtime and teeth brushing and ear cleaning and grooming and all of the other things that come with dog ownership? And then think about whether the added speed and easier obstacle avoidance and social aspect of a guide dog balances out the time commitment and all of the cons that come with it. I hope this was helpful if you're trying to make this decision, or at least entertaining and informative. If you have any questions about this or anything else, feel free to leave them in the comments or send us an email via the contact form on challengesolutions.org. Remember to submit questions for the Q&A episode of the Challenge Solutions podcast, and make sure you're following our blog, podcast, and YouTube channel for more content like this. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in another video.